Let's cross to Canberra now and catch up with the Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor. Thanks for joining us, Angus. In the wash-up to the budget, when you see the lack of effort to constrain spending, not just in the current year but in the out years as well, do you see that Labor's plan to address the structural deficit is going to be new taxes or tax increases?
Well, there's no doubt about that. I mean, this is a big spending, big taxing budget, Chris. It's very clear. If you compare the revenue line item and the expense line item in this budget with the March budget, there's $115 billion of extra spending and there's $152 billion of extra revenues, the vast majority of which is extra taxes. So this is a huge increase in the tax and spending burden of the government. But worse than that, despite the fact that there's been a very strong economy and strong tax revenues with rising income tax rates because of bracket creep, despite all of that, their budget deficit gets worse over the coming years, going from where it is today, which is about $32 billion, up to $51 billion in the next couple of years. So this is a typical traditional Labor budget. It's not what you need when you're trying to get downward pressure on interest rates and inflation. And of course, in it is a litany of broken promises. Top of the list, of course, is electricity prices, which you've been talking about, but also real wages. And it's important that Labor's given up on, it's put up the white flag on real wages. And more generally, it's given up on addressing cost of living pressures, and that's very clear in the budget papers.
Where are they going to get this additional tax, though? They're committed to the stage 3 tax cuts, so they could hardly walk away from that. It has been legislated, but clearly they could look at some sort of levy on high income earners or on high profits making companies. Where do you think Labor will look to boost tax, perhaps as early as the next regular budget in May?
Well, you talk about the stage 3 tax cuts. I mean, they are legislated, you're quite right, and Labor unambiguously committed to them at the last election. But there was no celebration of them at all, no highlighting of the benefits of tax cuts in these budget papers at all, which was quite remarkable, given that the vast majority of Australians are going to be able to keep 70 cents in the dollar at least in their pockets as a result of the stage 3 tax cuts. I would have thought at a time when we're trying to encourage Australians over the coming years to get out there, invest, build careers, take risks, that celebrating that kind of outcome would be a very positive thing. And getting rid of a bracket too. I mean, bracket creep is the thief in the knife. It's your incomes go up as inflation goes up, and that drives increasing tax rates on people. So it steals from you, if you like. Stage 3 tax cuts take that away. Labor makes no recognition of the importance of that. But there are other areas where I think they may well consider taxing. They've included some extra taxation or taxation of franking credits in this budget. They said they weren't going to do that. They are doing it. They've said that they're not going to touch superannuation, but we know there's every likelihood they will, or that they are looking at superannuation as an additional source of tax. I think more generally, Labor just needs to find tax to deal with its spending habit, and that's what the budget looks like, and I think that's what we're going to see in the coming months.
Well, let's look at energy. It was always clear that Labor was never going to be able to deliver on this promise to reduce electricity bills, but they claim you knew about the next rise in electricity bills before the election. Here's Jim Chalmers in Parliament today.
He has got his fingerprints all over this energy policy crisis. He hid an energy price increase from the Australian people during the election, and they won't forget it.
Yeah, well, I just want to ask you whether you knew these rises were on the way before the election, Angus, but also generally, of course, you must have seen the direction that we were heading with energy prices. So what would you be doing to stop them increasing now?
Oh, I think Labor thinks I had some super clever crystal ball where I could see where energy prices were going to go. And they didn't, and I kept this crystal ball from them, Chris. I mean, it's a ridiculous notion. And there's this sort of petty politics that we're seeing Jim Chalmers involved in. I mean, we need him focused on a plan for Australia. We didn't see a plan coming out, which is what Middle Australia needs. That was a report from the Australian Energy Regulator. It puts it out, not me, and I didn't see it. But the broader point here is that Labor has made this commitment time and time again to a $275 price reduction. They've given up on it, and it's clear in the budget now that prices are going to increase 56% in the next 2 years. And Jim Chalmers was all over the shop today on it, finally having to admit that his $275 price reduction that they committed to time and time again before the election was out of the budget.
People are going to suffer and there will be a political price for Labor to pay on that. But do you agree with the proposition that governments, federal and state, Labor and Liberal, over the last 10 years have completely made a hash of the realignment of our energy system, and they've done harm to this nation by getting rid of dispatchable, affordable, reliable energy before we've had the renewable energy and the secure supplies to replace it?
Well, that's where all the mistakes have been made. And, you know, that's why Chris, I don't know how many times I've been on your program talking about this over the years, that I was adamant at all times, if you lose a generator like Liddell, you have to replace it. That's why we committed to building the Kurri Kurri gas generator, that there's some lukewarm commitment towards from Chris Bowen, but I'd say at best it's lukewarm and he doesn't like the fact that it's gas. It's why we supported the Tallawarra gas generator down in the Illawarra, again, part of the replacement to Liddell. That's what you have to do. If you're going to lose a generator, you have to replace the generator with similarly dispatchable, reliable capacity. It's a very simple formula.
It's pretty straightforward.
What has to be done? That's what you have to do, Chris. And, you know, we did see, in my time as Energy Minister, a reduction in household bills of 8%. Labor doesn't like that because it worked. And it's very simple. More supply in, then you get prices down. It worked. Labor's not interested in that because they don't like the fuel sources that provide affordable, reliable, dispatchable supply now. So they are taking us to a terrible place on energy policy. I have no doubt about that. And it's, you know, I think incredibly disappointing that in this budget they've put up the white flag on this and so many other things on real wages and living pressures.
We are headed for real strife as a country on energy, and I'll talk to you again, Angus Taylor, about what the coalition alternative plan might look like. Thanks for joining us.
Good on you. Thanks.
Angus Taylor, their former energy minister, now the shadow treasurer.